The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
Mr. Amsterdam, thank you for your time and thank you for taking our questions. First of all, let us start with the update on Kvanchilashvili case. What is the situation at this point?
Look, we are waiting for the trial to begin. It should have begun weeks ago. We have no explanation for the delay. And we're simply in hold mode at this point.
You wrote an article, quite a long article with very interesting points and focuses in it. What prompted you to write this article?
Well, we came out a few days ago in English, and it will be out soon in Georgian, with a white paper called Bidzina's Law, the State Capture of Georgia. And state capture is a political concept that was developed in the 90s to describe Russia under the oligarchs and Yeltsin. And it's very applicable to Georgia today, a country that is manipulated by the figure of Ivanishvili, who is essentially a sultan in Georgia. There is no independent court system. He is destroying rule of law. He has complete control of the Georgian Dream Party. As you can tell by the heroic behavior of people on the streets, his will does not reflect the popular will. And this is typical in states that are captured, as is Georgia today by this gentleman.
You described the fears that are driving Ivanishvili in this white paper. In this paper, you maintain that Giorgi Kvanchilashvili tried even to persuade Ivanishvili that the U.S. was not behind the Credit Suisse fraud against him. Did Kvanchilashvili ever mention like this new term that we are getting more and more used to from the Georgian Dream and Ivanishvili himself, this global war party? Because recently in his speech, Ivanishvili openly talked about the global war party and its intentions without defining what the global war party is. And he said that this party is trying to mess things up in Georgia.
Look, I don't think Georgia was aware of this term. To be very frank with you, I first heard it in Ivanishvili's recent speech. Georgia's perception with Ivanishvili was always that Ivanishvili was growing increasingly paranoid of the West. And clearly, I mean, the speech that Ivanishvili gave recently is frightening. It's frightening with even questions being left as to the man's mental health. It seems to be a product of a mind that is consumed with paranoia and fear. And part of the reason I believe he's attacked my client is because my client has both brains and capital, and therefore has the means to become someone that he could view as an opponent. And to somebody in a captured state, they seek to destroy anyone who has resources that can ever be used to challenge them. So the Georgia War Party speech is the kind of speech more befitting Kim Il-jung than a European leader. And it was something that goes, I think, almost even beyond some of Putin's rantings at the Munich conference in 2007. I mean, this is pretty crazy stuff.
I don't know to what extent you follow the events that are unfolding in Georgia around the Russian law, but James O'Brien yesterday said that he was surprised to hear that Ivanishvili believed that he is already sanctioned when there are no sanctions, no Western sanctions imposed on him yet. Do such fears, do such exaggerations fit into the profile that you are providing in this white paper about Ivanishvili, and what is his profile specifically?
Well, look, in the paper we develop the story of Ivanishvili, and we put in one place all of the factors that have led to the sultanship and the capture today. And when you actually put this together, his dominance and control over the courts and some of the background noise, the fact that Georgian special services have been trained by the Belarusians, all of this seems to have been acted out on the streets of Tbilisi. And you know, I follow this foreign law very closely. I was involved in opposing it in Russia. I'm aware of what's happened in Georgia since I was first working in Georgia in 2007. So obviously, I'm greatly distressed by the idea that the veto will be overridden. And again, refer people to this document, which I think sets out how Ivanishvili has surrounded himself with a group of people who are all afraid to actually provide him with much independent advice, and all appear economically dependent on him. Very similar to that extent to what we see in Russia with Putin.
Yes, since you were involved in this law in Russia, do you see the similarities? Because you know, the main argument of the Georgian Dream is that this is not a Russian law, and you know that the main slogan of the people in streets against this law is no to Russian law. Is it a Russian law or not?
No, it's absolutely a Russian law. It's absolutely a law that within the captured state can be used to destroy civil society, as are the captured courts. You can't look at the law in isolation from a legal system that is hopelessly broken. And that's the situation in Georgia. And in fairness to Ivanishvili, the system was broken before, but it's now been accelerated with this sort of one-man rule. And of course, his recent resumption of power is very important. There is a plan afoot. It's very clear that these actions are thought out. A question that has to be asked is the role of Russia, because what he's doing seems very programmed, seems very consistent with the paranoia we're seeing from the Kremlin, seems more, if you will, militaristic, ties into Kremlin activities in Moldova, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan. So this seems to be broader than just Georgia.
So would you say that the main motivation of Ivanishvili at this point is like direct directions from Russia, or is it just his money? He already mentioned that he had lost $2 billion because of this fraud and because of the global war party.
Look, it is, you know, I am not his psychiatrist. We can't be in his mind. But he is a leader that is subject to pressure from Moscow. He is a leader that also made a tremendous amount of his wealth in Russia and has been deeply involved in Russia, as you know. So the fact that he is becoming something of a Yanukovych figure in Georgia is very frightening and very, very concerning to all of those who care about the future of Georgia.
Mr. Amsterdam, what would you say, and if you know, of course, what would you say about the offshore law, and where does this offshore law fit in this bigger puzzle? Because that was the law that was adopted in 3 hearings in 1 day. Of course, many saw it was, many saw it was Ivanishvili's personal interest for this law to be pushed. How does it fit in this bigger picture?
Well, we discuss it in the white paper. I call it the Batumi Regeneration Act. Essentially, he's going to make Georgia friendly to oligarchs who are facing problems in the West, including himself. It allows a massive repatriation of income from offshore for Ivanishvili personally, as well as stimulating money from abroad relating to Russians and others facing sanctions. So it's consistent with Russia's goal of maximizing sanctions avoidance and his own goal of repatriation without taxation.
But this won't be an easy process, right? With all the sanctions and all the scrutiny about the sanctions. In which case it will be easier to make this law work as you describe what Ivanishvili wants at this point.
Well, I mean, look, the law essentially allows him and others to repatriate income into Georgia without tax. I think it's clear, it's simple. It certainly violates every concept of fairness for the Georgian people, and confirms the sultanate idea, the idea that he's putting his own interests above those of the people.
Do you see any signs of transparency being important value in all of this? Because this law is named after transparency, right? So it should bring more transparency to the table.
Look, this law and the transparency naming comes right out of George Orwell's 1984. The Ministry of Peace being the Ministry of War. I mean, these labels have absolutely no meaning, and they are an attempt to demonstrate cynically the unlimited power Ivanishvili holds in Georgia.
What is the role of business community in all of this? In our last interview, you mentioned that business should be more outspoken in defending Kvanchilashvili as well, because the question then arises, who will be next? Now the picture has expanded, right? So how do you see the role of the business community in Georgia, and do you follow their statements, and what is your perception? How is business community dealing with this situation?
Look, I follow the business community in Georgia as well, by the way, as the business community in Ukraine. And I think to some extent in Georgia, they're being led by the street. What we've seen in Georgia is a widespread demonstration of people voting for their feet, for freedom, for Europe. And I think this is something that the business community, I know, will embrace. And, unfortunately, my client will not suffer this fate alone. His case is emblematic of the risks to the business community and why it's very important for them to, I think, rally around this case and also further protect themselves and ensure that their voices are heard during the next electoral period.
By the way, is it your advice to Giorgi Bachishvili to be low profile on this Russian law? And I'm asking this because I remember, and in this white paper, you also highlight that all his problems basically started when he explicitly supported Ukraine in Russia-Ukraine war and tried to defend the West and Western values. But today we do not hear Bachishvili on Russian law, for example, specifically.
Well, I think in fairness to George, his voice is, he was in the forefront of many of these issues. But when the streets are alive with hundreds of thousands of people marching, I am assuming he feels that in some ways it isn't necessary for him to join. The fact that he's essentially had us take the time and effort to put together the white paper, I think makes it clear that he remains a thought leader in terms of Georgia. And I have to say, you know, I've had the privilege to represent many very important business leaders, and I believe the way George has acted through this is not only courageous, but exemplary. He is a brilliant mind that has really put Georgia's interests first. He stood up to this assault on his person and on his very freedom heroically. And I am sure there will be more to come. And I'm sure, as he did last time at court, he will speak out when he deems it appropriate.
Does the path towards EU, looking at those 9 steps that Georgia has to fulfill in order to open the negotiations for the EU integration, do you think this is also viewed by Ivanishvili as a fear that he won't have all that power that you have summarized in one phrase, and that's a state capture?
There's no question. There is no question that this is a man who fears transparency, who fears rule of law, who fears fairness, who fears the development of those in Georgia like Bachishvili, who are putting Georgia first. This is a man who has put himself over the interests of his nation. It's shameful, and I hope it will be reversed. And I hope the EU plays their cards correctly with Georgia, because it's very important for Europe to rally around the people of Georgia. As frustrating as this recent passage of the bill may be.
Do you see sanctions on the way? Because James O'Brien said yesterday that if the law proceeds with the pace it has been proceeding, then there might be sanctions, individual sanctions for those who are responsible about this law.
Look, I think it's very possible. Also very possible because of the massive amount of subversion of sanctions that goes on in Georgia every day. So yes, I think it's highly possible.
What do you mean about the massive subversion of sanctions that's going on in Georgia daily?
I think it's well documented that there are people in Georgia who are very involved in working around sanctions and supplying Russia with equipment and technology. I'm not going to go into further detail, but that's well known, and that is also a precipitator of sanctions.
But why doesn't the West talk about it openly then, if these are the documented facts?
Look, they've certainly spoken to me about it. I'm not sure why it's not more public, but it's not my it's not really in my purview to get into that. This is information that Western governments have, and I think it will come out probably during another round of sanctions.
And my last question, and thank you for taking your time. What price could Georgia pay for this? Because it won't be easy for Georgia, for example, to draw investments when the government or the I don't know, the ruling party will be sanctioned, right? Or it won't be easy for Georgia to draw institutional investors when the path Georgia is taking towards Russia, diverting from its Euro-Atlantic integration, even though people are in streets and even though we see that majority of people are against these decisions that that the ruling party is taking unanimously without listening to its people. What could be the price?
The price could be very high. But again, I am someone who remains hopeful. There's an election coming. There has been an outpouring of support for the people of Georgia. The behavior of Ivanishvili has been shameful, has been obvious, has been non-transparent, and to some extent has been off the charts mentally. This speech is shocking. So I am hopeful that in this present situation, there may be opportunities for change. And all we can do is wait and see. And we're translating the paper into Georgian. It'll be available for distribution shortly, and I would commend it to your viewers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amsterdam, for your time, and thank you for talking to us about the white paper before it comes out in Georgian. Thank you so much.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.